Welcome to DAAN. It's our Data Assessment and Accountability Network. And I'm going to get started with some introductions. First, the agenda. We're going to, oops, that's an old agenda, sorry. Eliminate that, but let me go through the DAAN team, and then I'm going to show you the Canvas page, which has kind of an updated agenda. So I'm Evan Bartelheim. I'm the project director for accountability and data literacy. I'm joined by my colleague, Hillary Weissman. I'm also joined by our two compatriots in the assessment unit, Stephen Bartlett and Stephanie Fortunato. Hey, Stephen.
Good morning.
And Margarita Sandoval, who's our behind the scenes person taking care of business answering. If you send something to the DAAN at LACOE.edu, it's going to Margarita and she will get it to which one of us it most applies. So we always thank her for being on top of everything. So what's in Canvas for today? Just let me share real quick what's in the Canvas page. And so our presentation has been uploaded. The link is there. This is our agenda. We have the CDA 2-page flyer, which will cover a little bit more, summarizing those penalty rules for participation rate. It's going to be put into a larger context. So I hope we can assuage some concerns. And this is my view, of course. Our modules page, you can see our, we have the excerpts from the technical guide, some what data is used flyer, some CALPADS updates, just because there may be some more clarity in some of those. And then we may upload some additional assessment resources that are linked. Everything's linked in the presentation, but if we determine later they might be better or more easily accessible, we can put them up there into our Canvas page. So back to the PowerPoint. And just a reminder, the purpose of our meeting is to provide our LEAs in LA County and sometimes outside of LA County with the latest in the data assessment and accountability changes. Everything is current as of this morning, I think. Things have been changing rapidly, as you all know, so it's subject to change. We encourage you to use the chat to ask your questions. We will stop periodically as questions fill up the chat to try to answer them in real time. But if we don't answer them in real time, we do like to answer our questions with links to EdCode or FAQs or some other kind of resource rather than just off-the-cuff responses. And they're more meaningful. And then that also allows people who can't attend or who weren't completely listening to go back later and look at the follow-up Q&A that we send out with all those links. So if we don't answer a question in real time, just assume we'll get around to it. It's just a matter of sometimes the questions are too, the answers will be too involved if we skip over them. So to get started, we have a couple of celebrations. We sent out a little reminder, and hopefully we caught most everybody, but we do have some retirements this year, some people who have been in DAAN for a long time and just want to wish them well. We also know that there probably are some people moving on to new roles. And so if you want in the chat, if we didn't cover you, catch you here, drop in the chat if you have a change of your status. So if you're moving on, if you're lucky enough to be retiring after this year, could you blame anybody for retiring after this year? I wish I could retire, but you know, too soon to be 10th graders who need to go to college, go figure. I know there are also some changes in titles. That's amazing. Congratulations, anyone who. We hope that everybody gets to stay in DAAN while moving up the ranks. So if we didn't capture your change here, please let us know so we can bid you farewell, bid you good luck, or change your job title in our contact list. So let's get started with just some assessment and accountability. These are just reminders. And I wanted to note that, we're going to break up we have some professional development. We kind of separated them out, based kind of on the level. I think our assessment team has some very assessment specific professional development. We wanted to talk up front about some of the ones that affect those of you who kind of handle assessment and accountability, kind of the nexus. But first of all, we will have our virtual meetings next year for DAAN. As it stands now, it's all virtual. We haven't arrived at a clear picture, even within the county, of when we'll be able to use rooms and how readily we can use rooms. And then we just know, and we'll have a poll later, but not everybody is interested in driving to Downey if you're in the North Valleys, for example. So we're still trying to figure out how best to accommodate everybody, but we do have these DAAN meetings. The flyer is on the front of our DAAN page, and maybe Hillary, if you can drop the flyer in for our meetings. We rolled everybody, if you're already registered for DAAN, if you're getting notifications via OMS for this meeting, we rolled you over until next year. So you don't have to register for anything. This registration link is for anybody who's new to participate in DAAN. So if you have a change, if you had somebody new at your district or your charter who needs access to DAAN or who would benefit from our communications that go out, they can register through here. Then some other things that are coming up. I put the CAASPP using assessment data training series here just because I'll be participating as one of the panelists for a couple of the sessions, and I know Brian Huff from Roland is going to be on a panel for the 4th session talking about how they use data in Roland Unified. So we just had some local interest. We thought you might want to join. It's going to be an excellent series. It's the CDE is the host, but WestEd develops all the materials. It's always top notch. So I think it'll be of interest to anybody who is in our assessment accountability network. And then just wanted to remind everybody about the assessment and accountability information meeting. It's actually 3 meetings broken up for 2 hours each, coming up in August. Hopefully you have those on your radar. It's on the CAASPP upcoming training opportunities webpage. There's a lot of information being dumped there. So we're already planning to do at a minimum 1 office hours as a follow-up to kind of, after we hear all the information, to just open up our office hours and see, let's make some sense of everything, what's significant, what questions may still persist. And so we'll announce those dates and get those out to you. It's also an opportunity early in the year to kind of touch base with people, because it'll be a long gap sometimes between our last meeting here in May and then our first meeting again, which isn't until October. That seems strange. So we want to make an opportunity to touch base with you. Also wanted to point out the CERA conference, the California Educational Research Association. It's happening in person November 2nd through 4th at the Disneyland Hotel. This covers a lot of assessment, data use, data visualization, all sorts of things that are relevant to this team. The link is included here for the main website for CERA. We're all planning to go, so we hope we can see you there. And then this reminder, this is a very important reminder. I actually think we went through this last year, but there are a couple of things you need to know, and you may or may not have these roles. But if you're the California Dashboard Coordinator, just know that they're going to be resetting that list in August. They do it every year. And if you are currently that Dashboard Coordinator, you'll get there'll be notification going out to superintendents, the existing members, and there will be a window where they purge the list, and then it'll reopen for renewal of the Dashboard Coordinator status. This is important because it allows you to upload your local indicators, and also the person who has the Dashboard Coordinator status can there's some options for including notes related to any of the component parts. So any kind of clarifying comments around why a status was very low, for example, those can happen there. So the dashboard local indicator window is scheduled to open from August 22nd through September 30th. And this was an issue last year because I think there's a lot of confusion as we went back that you have the local indicators approved in June along with your LCAP. And then a lot of people thought, well, that's it, right? It's done. Well, no, you actually have to then upload those by September 30th. And this year, because we didn't have, accountability is back in action, this is where you have to self-report met, not met for 2 years. Well, there wouldn't be that this year, but met, not met. And one of the criteria for met is that you uploaded it to the dashboard. So we want to make sure you're aware of that. The other thing that is out there, and this caused a lot of confusion last year, was there's a different list, the Secure Accountability Coordinator listserv. This is not going to be reset. Last year, they kind of simultaneously reset these lists, which caused a lot of confusion, and people weren't sure, well, which am I? Am I both? And every LEA has up to 2 secure accountability coordinators. I asked for the list. I have the list, and the CDE noted our list is pretty anemic. We didn't get a lot of participants. And so if your LEA is not represented on this list, then there's definitely material being sent out that you are unaware of. And so if you want to contact us to clarify, am I on the list? Or if somebody is on the list for my LEA, who is it? Send an email to dan@lacoe.edu. Eventually, and this will be, I think, kind of system to equivalent to the CARS system that the CD maintains. They want a single sign-on for all these things that'll have a lot more flexibility, and there can be an assignment of people, and they're trying to eliminate all these emails going to superintendents for approval, which just creates headaches. So more to come on that particular component. As relates to the secure accountability listserv, and I've sent this out a couple of times, so hopefully you did pursue it, but today is the final day to access materials through this new SOARS system, the Student Online Accountability Record Status System. And so they uploaded the 2021 College and Career Indicator student level data file there. It closes today at the end of the business day, right? So the passcodes to access the system were sent out by the Secure Accountability Listserv. And the value in this file, and it may not be of huge interest right now, but it's a way to do kind of a data check, like who received what, and they give you student ID level. So it's student level data. So you can say, okay, we think we know what was reported in the college and career measures for the student, but we want to double check. And this will be incredibly important moving forward when the college and career indicator goes back up on the dashboard in 2023. It'll allow you to know, instead of just putting everything into a black box known as CALPADS, you can actually see what was assigned to whom. And because some of the measures in the full college and career indicator are so complex, you may have a student who they completed a CT pathway. I don't see as many CT pathway completers as I would expect. Well, the CT pathway completion is actually attributed to A through G completion if they do both of it. So that's just one of those little strange business rules that this will help you understand and make sure that everything's being reported accurately. So that closes today. Just wanted to put that on your radar. And now for some state assessment and accountability updates. Any questions? I see no questions in the chat so far. So I'll keep moving. Okay, so CALPADS, the CALPADS upgrade and the effects on statewide testing. This was shared with us at RAN last week, this little table. And of course, I think everybody's got an opinion and people wondering why this took place when it did in the middle of testing. Whether or not that was the issue, I don't even think that that's the right question to ask per se. I think it had to happen, but what bigger question is, could there have been more resources to have done this more seamlessly and without such a giant disruption? Because it would have disrupted submissions had it happened another time part of the year. They planned originally in the fall and then they delayed it. During the summer, there's your submissions for end of year that are so vital and do affect accountability as well. So the upgrade was necessary, though. The processing time, as anybody who works with CALPADS knows, had become unmanageable. Many of our CALPADS technicians were having to work evenings and weekends in order to get out of the queues. So that was a real problem. So there was the need to upgrade it. However, as you know, if there were students who were introduced new or they had changes to their key demographic information after the shutdown, it became increasingly difficult to get them into the system. So the biggest demographics were related to test settings, the IDEA indicator, if that changed, if the student had English language acquisition status files. And there are a lot of issues around the ELAS files that were really CALPADS issues. It wasn't that the LEAs had problems, but CALPADS resorted the ELAS based on the date. So it created all sorts of anomalies, which you may still be seeing. And so ETS has been manually editing and updating the CALPADS file twice weekly instead of that nightly upload, which is supposed to happen. And they continue doing so. In fact, the CDE had hoped to post over 3,400 English learners and 3,200 TBDs for testing by last Wednesday, May 25th. So LEA should have been notified of and sent a list of the SSIDs who've been updated for addressing both the initial LPAC and then the summit of LPAC. So hopefully you'll get to those. And also we had login difficulties, just to add on top of it, where we had an overload on the system and there are a couple of like the systems down right in the middle of testing. So it's probably not nice to put the little dumpster fire icon down here. It sure has felt like one. I was thinking about this weekend. I joined DAAN as a member 10 years ago, and I cannot remember a time that was more overwhelming, confusing. So I think we all really feel for you and just trying to stay apprised of all the changes and all your concerns. And hopefully some of the things we shared this morning will maybe put some context around that and give you a little less fear. Just to note too, then, that the CDE sent out this letter to superintendents for both county and district, as well as charter school administrators. And they noted, they've acknowledged, and you may have seen also there was a CALPADS Q&A where some of the top CALPADS administrators came forward. They acknowledged that they made some errors and the system is still running poorly. So they are aware that these issues are affecting the ability of LEAs to assess students. They recognize that LEAs have concerns about meeting the participation rate and the potential consequences for accountability and compliance for not meeting that participation rate. And they want to know that CDE is actually closely monitoring the impact on testing and participation rate. They're paying attention. More about that later. They also recognize, though, there may be an impact on the end of year submissions in CALPADS, which also affect the dashboard. We'll talk more about that later as well. And then the effect of the system changes on LEA staff, and this I think is less well recognized, but the system is very different now, and their business rules and how to approach things have changed. So a lot of our CALPADS folks are feeling like pretty overwhelmed and frustrated, and it's just very hard on those staff. So if you haven't brought them something from Starbucks lately, I would highly recommend it. CALPADS people are hard to come by, and good ones are hard to come by, and they are really having a tough go right now. And they put up a couple solutions. They have the known updates on the CAASPP page now. There's a known issues log that appears on the CALPADS site as well. So they're working to fix it, and they do acknowledge that it's created a lot of problems. So that said, I want to jump into the participation rate, because this is on a lot of people's minds, that of course it affects everyone. So this is as of last week. This was at our RAN meeting. This is statewide participation on CAASPP, right? And so this is actually, I want to clarify, this isn't necessarily participation rate. This is completion rate, or expected completion rate, which I guess is slightly different from participation rate. Participation rate is the final outcome. So you can see statewide, they're feeling pretty good that, you have 91% of smarter ELA and 87% of smarter math. The CAST is at 82%, the Cal Alt for ELA 76%, Cal Alt for Math 75%, Cal Alt for Science 61%, and then the California Spanish Assessment is at 75%. Then as far as the LPAC, they noted that the initial LPAC was currently at 98%. The summative LPAC is at 78%, with that May 31st being today deadline. That was as of last week, and then the alternate LPAC at 80%. So we just were curious. We wanted to launch a poll here. Hillary, are you able to launch the poll? There we go. So if you could give us your projection. We have 3 questions here. We'd like to know whether or not you think you're going to meet the participation rate overall for CAASPP, not just in a student group. And then the participation rate specifically for students with disabilities on CAASPP, because that is the one not having the IDEA indicator. So we know student groups are one of the areas that are identified for participation rate penalties. And then participation rate for the summative LPAC. So we'll give it a minute and I'll share our results. We'll see how they track too. And just to clarify, I know we keep saying 95%, but yes, we know 100% participation rate is required by federal law, but for the purposes of accountability, this is for the LPAC, anything below 95% will result in an automatic assignment of low, which is the equivalent of an orange on the dashboard this year. All right, it looks like it slowed down a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and share the results for you. Stephanie, thumbs up. Can you see the results right now? Interesting. So what can I do?
Does it give you the option to share the results?
Yeah, it did, but it wasn't showing. So let me just share my screen. That will make it visible. Okay.
Oh,
So
no. They could see them. They can see them.
okay, thank you. All right, so about 72% of you feel strongly that you'll meet the overall CAASPP, with about 22% feeling uncertain right now. And that's not exactly, but close, I would say, to reasonable, aligning with the CAASPP participation rate. And as far as the students with disabilities, that individual student group, not nearly as rosy a picture with, it looks like the majority, 52%, are either uncertain or do not think that they're going to be able to meet that particular student group participation rate, which, you know, it can result in the loss depending on how far you're down. And then finally, the LAA, the participation rate, we see about 74% at the in the 48 or 74% feel strongly that they'll meet the summative LPAC participation rate. Yeah, Stephen, I think this, the only way I could get it to share was to share my whole screen. So sorry about that. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and we'll kind of talk about this again. I do think that the results are consistent with our, sorry.
And just for context, Evan, too, there are some of the comments in chatter about, you know, the CALPADS issues having an impact on testing and TBDs not being given an SSID and things like that. So
thanks. Yeah, I think that, I mean, all of these are factors. The CDE is well aware of it. Even the factors that we, anyone who is active participant in the CALPADS Q&As or is, you know, talks to their CALPADS folks, realizes there are all these anomalies to people appearing on your list to test who aren't even enrolled in your LEA and were not enrolled in your LEA, or just the students who are assigned the LPAC summative when in fact they are not eligible for the LPAC summative. It was based on out of order ELAS and some of these strange things. Not everything that's been showing up is even kind of fits into the category of, oh, we couldn't get them into the system because of the delays. Anyway, so we recognize that. And yes, again, I see that one comment about 100%. Yes, you're right, Wendy, 100%. We realize it's 100% are required to be testing. We're talking specifically 95% as it affects the dashboard. So there are some other factors we want to bring in, and I think it's been a while since we actually talked about the dashboard. So people may not be familiar with the fact that there are these grace periods within the window. So not everybody is necessarily going to be expected to have tested, depending on when they may have left your LEA, if they left your LEA, or when they arrived in your LEA. So this is a link from the 2000, or graphic, I should say, from the 2019 dashboard technical guide. We actually linked this in the PowerPoint, and it's in the module for today. So there are some rules related to students who transfer in or out during a school's determined testing window. And these grace periods were developed. So if an LEA has a testing window of 31 or more calendar days, schools would have two grace periods. There's a 14-day grace period at the beginning of the testing window, and there's a 14-day grace period at the end of the testing window. So if you have a student who transferred out of your LEA at the beginning in that first 14 days of the testing window, you will not be held accountable for having tested that student. That student will be, these business rules will be applied after the fact. They'll see the exit date, and they will remove that student from your account for accountability purposes. Similarly, if you had a student who transferred in the last 14 days of your testing window, you won't be held accountable for that student either. And you know, this is specific to CAASPP. I want to refer that because there are federal laws related to needing to test English learners who arrive, and we've had a lot of newcomers as well into the country from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, from Central America. So we know that's affecting LEAs as well. But just so you know, there's a category there of students that you may be worried about that may not ultimately be placed on your dashboard because of this accountability testing window. And the testing window actually starts not when you schedule it, but when that first student takes a test. So when a student first opens a test, that launches your testing window. And important note here that the CDE is actually monitoring these challenges. So they haven't updated their technical guide for the dashboard since 2019, and it could be that they will look at a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing and modify their rules accordingly, recognizing that it was difficult for students to get into the system because of the delays. So this was shared with us at RAN, that they are monitoring this and that they will give some consideration to that. It's not that this is hard and fast and we won't ever make any changes. They are very aware of the challenges faced. This is just an aside because a lot of people have asked this question is, well, we know that the science test isn't going on the dashboard, so there's no penalty. But we still want to know, how is it being measured? What is, because you've got students who are assigned in grades 10, 11, or 12. So this is the response from CDE. So for grades 5 and 8, it's pretty straightforward. They divide the number of students who participated in the science assessment, in a science assessment, from the number of students who were enrolled during the start of your testing window. However, for high school, the participation rate is calculated exclusively on the cohort of students enrolled in grade 12. So they're not looking at those 10th and 11th graders. So the numerator is the number of grade 12 students who completed the science test in high school. So any past years, so if they were tested last year, if you made the opportunity available to test them in 11th grade and now they're 12th graders, they already had that test, they didn't need to test again this year, they'll be included. So any student who tested in any of their years who is now in the grade 12 cohort. And then the denominator is the number of grade 12 students enrolled on the first day of the CAASPP testing window. So science is not included on the dashboard, but it's important to know that the CDE does actually report the participation rate to the Fed. So it does have an accountability outcome. They report at the state level, not at the individual LEA level. I'm just scanning some of the. Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Stephen knows for those 12 plus students, so these are our adult transition students. Do non-testing CAS students get penalized every day? That's a good question, Stephen. We'll shoot that. We'll put that in the Q&A that we follow up with. So what is the ultimate impact in terms of the assignment of the lowest obtainable scale score? It can be substantial. And I was thinking, I could walk this through. I did this back of the napkin calculation and kind of came to the same conclusions working with another school district, one of our school districts, and we determined, yes, it has a big impact. She had a high school where they had about an 80% participation rate. They were very high on the dashboard, but the calculations after running through them again put them into the medium status. So you can see the examples here. Applying the old criteria, if you had a 19% gap between the required participation rate and 95% and the actual participation rate, the old criteria was to multiply that 19% by 0.25, the 0.25 penalty. And then you subtract that amount from the distance from standard. So you end up with a pretty okay, 11.6. This is for ELA, your distance from standard. However, under the new model where you have all those students, so you have, in order to get to the percentage, 95%, you would have to have 70 additional students tested to have reached that. Now those 70 students are assigned that loss. Then that loss is calculated, as a negative number, and it's added to the positive number. So whatever the distance from standard was, the sum of distance from standard for those students, the 268 students who did test. And you can calculate this actually using if you go to the CAASPP -LPAC, the summative assessment results page, you can see your mean distance from standard, I use that, and then you can multiply that times your number of students tested. It's not exactly accurate, but you can get a sense of what it'd be, and then figure out what would it have been if we'd had the same, if you had a participation rate lower than 95%, you can see what it would have been. So you can get a sense. So when you added that, the penalty of negative 19,530 to the, and I don't have it here, but the 4,000 or so, whatever the sum of the students who tested, you got a negative 44.9. So it's pretty substantial, the loss. So yes, that's a problem, and particularly problem when you're not giving the benefit of both status and change this year when we're looking only at status. So a few more things on that. So remember, there are a couple of other student groups that are going to be excluded from the participation rate denominator. So any students who are absent from testing due to a significant medical emergency, as long as you had the medical emergency code entered into TOMS. Any English learners who have been in the US for less than a year for their ELA would not be included. Any students who we talked about a minute ago who transferred in or transferred out within those first 2 weeks from your LEA during the grace period, or those who transferred in at the final 2 weeks. Then there are these kind of random, that we keep hearing about, students who appear in TOMS with an assigned test who are not enrolled in your LEA, who you can't find. We've been assured, and Bob Martin was at our assessment Wednesdays at 1 a couple weeks ago. He said these will all come clean at the wash, and you'll actually have the opportunity after your testing window closed to look at all your students. If they're still on there, you can work to get them purged from TOMS. But they will clean up these kind of random students assigned. And then there's the students who are assigned to another LEA for that District of Special Education accountability measure. So I also wanted to bring up one other element that I think this is kind of lost on people. There is both the assigned loss, which is a penalty that's assigned for participation rate. Then you may have seen this went out in the CAASPP, the assessment spotlight a few weeks ago. There is what they call earned loss, and the CDE folks admitted that this is probably, they need to work on their language because they both use the term loss. But really, one is assigned as a penalty, and the other is actually earned, because if a student receives an invalidated test, the test is going to be scored, and those students are going to be receive a student score report. It is going to have a notation that there was an irregularity. And I'm just going to tell you from personal experience, I had this happen. One of my middle schools, a very high-performing middle school, where one of our teachers allowed 100 of his algebra students, 8th grade algebra students, to use an unapproved calculator. This was a few years ago. And there really was no impact on the dashboard. In this case, there would be. This is a new assignment. So and hopefully this remains small. Hopefully you don't have a lot of students whose scores are being invalidated, who you're finding the STARS report for. It would have been pretty devastating under the new rules. So in the case of students with invalid scores, they do count as actually having participated. So it doesn't affect your participation rate, provided that they signed on to all parts of the test. However, for the accountability purposes, the student will be assigned, whether it's ELA or math, the lowest obtainable scale score for that grade level and subject for the purpose of calculating the accountability concept of distance from standard. And so this is actually pretty substantial. So for the case of like an 11th grader in math, we know that the assigned loss for participation rate is negative 247. If you have an invalid test score, the lowest obtainable scale score for grade 11 math is 2,280, which is actually 348 points below standard. So if you have a lot of, just be aware of this. If you have a lot of students whose tests may be invalidated, that too is going to have an impact. And these are considered more of an earned loss, and so those can be substantial. So on all those happy notes, I want to go into the dashboard updates and some of the things that are going on with the dashboard in consideration of all the things we've talked about. So first of all, the CVE recognizes that the dashboard is going to reflect just status this year. It's going to be challenging with just status and the benefit of not having the benefit of change. So they're looking at all 11 of their additional reports. So these are the additional reports in a typical year. In the past couple of years, we've only had a couple things here, but in a typical year, you'd include these 11 additional reports. Now, next year, we won't have the college and career indicator per se, we'll have a college and career measures report. So they're looking at all these for the 2022 dashboard, and they, of course, are going to have to revise these reports because a lot of these 5x5s won't exist. So there'll be like a 1x5, and they're going to have to change these to reflect the status only data. But they also want to include data and information that will be helpful to LEAs for local planning, as well as local conversations about accountability. And there's one critical update to the reports is related to the academic indicator. And, given that the U.S. Department of Ed is requiring the lowest obtainable scale score, and the CDE knows that with all the CalPADS issues, that the participation rate has become harder to achieve, and throw in the fact that you have a lot of students who may be testing remotely and may not be participating, or a lot of more opt-outs because it's been a stressful year and parents feel inclined to opt out. So they would like to have a standalone report that will show LEA's data without the federal penalty applied. And there are a couple different options they're looking at, but they feel that this is going to allow LEAs to inform communities of their true performance rather than what appears immediately on the dashboard. So this is a good news. And they are looking at different options, and they are definitely thinking this is, they have limitations. They have to put right up front, based on the federal guidance, what the status was with the applied lowest obtainable scale score. But in this other measure, you might get more direct measure, and they're going to support also with some additional resources. So they want you to be able to communicate your academic indicators to your community. They're planning to release a toolkit that will help this. We're certainly looking at it, and we'll do our best to support you in how to communicate with your board and your educational partners. And what distance from standard means in this year. And of course, this applies also to other indicators, not just academic indicator. We know that there's going to be a lot of suspensions this year for some LEAs. We know that chronic absenteeism is going to be a problem. So expect to have a lot of communication coming out to help support you as you communicate, because we know it was a very difficult year. This is just a side note because it's just been out there forever. I just wanted to note that there's this teacher assignment data file that was supposed to appear in your SARCs. It's supposed to appear on the dashboard with local indicator priority 1. It actually is supposed to appear in your within your LCAPs. And we keep on asking, when is this coming out? Last week we asked, they said it'll come out in late spring. I'm looking at my watch, it's like May 25th. I'm like, isn't it late spring already? But they still say expect it's going to be coming out. But we know that LEAs are in the process of updating the LCAPs and the local indicators. So they did give us two options. I've talked to the CDE about this. You could defer if you're taking your local indicators to your board soon and the data is not released. You can defer and say we're waiting for this data file to be released. And by the way, it's the CalSAS 2020-21 data. It's not 21-22 data. So what will be released is 2021 data. Alternatively, the CDE has said in other webinars that you can use local data. Now, I have talked to our LCAP team here, if you're going to report out on local data, still continue to use the 2020-21 CalSAS report that's available. This is different. It hasn't been vetted by the CDE. They're trying to identify the misassignments based on the federal definitions. The CalSAS report that would be available to your HR people does not include those federal definitions. So you could report out on that, but make a note that this is possibly going to change. And I think that's what the concern is, especially if you're a larger LEA. If you're very small, your person may know, yeah, we only had 3 misassignments, but there are things like local assignments which have different criteria, which they're not considered misassignments by the state board or by your monitoring authority, but they would be based on the federal definitions that the state board adopted. And we don't want there to be a huge mix that people may come call into question why you posted you had 0 misassignments when in fact you had 20 if you're trying to be deceptive. We're trying to keep people out of trouble. So I threw this in here because it is a dashboard thing. It's kind of random. It's just been out there. Just because I think what everybody's worried about is based on everything we've talked about and the academic indicator and the likelihood that your student groups are going to be affected by participation rate and the assignment loss and what that may mean. I wanted to revisit at the end of the day. Obviously, you have to explain to your board and your educational partners why the dashboard looks the way it does. But there's also this other element, which is identification for the purposes of meeting ESSA for comprehensive support and improvement and additional targeted support and improvement, as well as differentiated assistance. So maybe some good news on that front. So just a reminder that the Department of Ed required that the state make these eligibility determinations on the 2022 dashboard. And we know that it's limited to status based on AB 130, not allowing us to use any data from the prior year for the purposes of the dashboard. So we have this one-time COVID addendum that will allow us to change the CSI, ATSI criteria for 22-23. And we're only using the 5 measures, and we're using proxies. The status level will be a proxy for the colors that we ordinarily would get. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the CD has submitted this, the state board approved this, the state has submitted it to the feds. It hasn't been finally approved yet. It likely will be approved because the Department of Ed forwarded this, but there are some unanswered questions. Those are the kinds of things I want to bring to your attention because I think there's a little more hope there. So this is the change in methodology. So these are the status levels. Of course, they're reversed in some cases. So a status level for chronic absenteeism and suspension differs. We want very low absenteeism and suspension. So that would be a blue, very high would be a red. But for graduation rate, our academic indicator and our English language progress indicator, which again will be, we need 3 years for that. We have 2 years to be included. So they would be reversed. So a very high would be blue, a very low would be red. So that's kind of how the status is being used as a proxy this year. However, and this is how the state submitted in their plan for identification of CSI. So they would use these proxies. And they had these criteria identified. We talked about this last time of schools with a very low status and schools with a very low but one indicator of another status. This is for all students, right? So for CSI, these first 2 criteria are likely all that will need to be applied to reach the threshold of 5%, a minimum of 5% of students, of schools, excuse me, in the all students category of Title I schools. So that's what CSI contains. The ESSA requires you identify a minimum of 5% of your lowest performing Title I schools. The state believes that the application of these 2 criteria, the top 2, will give us a number that meets that criteria. They wouldn't have to apply the other criteria. However, when I asked about ATSI, and ATSI takes anybody who is in the CSI eligible pool but was not assigned CSI, and says, okay, if you have any student groups who meet these criteria, and I thought, boy, with all the things going on this year, this could apply to a lot of schools. And they said, well, that's yet to be determined. So there's still a lot of things to be determined related to ATSI. ATSI, by the way, does not come with a lot of you have to have a SIPSA with some aligned plans to address your student groups, and that's about it. The authorizing agent, or in an LEA, the district has to monitor those SIPSAs, but really it's not a huge burden that's being placed that you might imagine. So, and it's not yet determined how far ATSI would be extended, how many of these criteria would be applied to the student group level. But I just want to clarify, because CSI, ATSI can be very confusing, but that's still, CSI is largely determined, ATSI is not. Similarly, differentiated assistance, which applies to districts only this year, next year, is still somewhat up in the air. So we're assuming that, yes, more districts might be pulled into differentiated assistance based on the criteria that we've used in the past. But according to the CDE, last week's RAN, this is still being talked about. State board has some flexibility, and they pointed out one very specific thing, which is when it comes to the academic indicator, the not met in the academic indicator will be red on one and orange on the other, or red on both. So the problem is when assigning this the status, that while very low is pretty predictable, low, which would be the proxy for orange, is not as reliable a data source. So that still needs to be considered. So maybe the criteria for differentiated assistance for the academic indicator would require both ELA and math to be very low status. So that's something that's being talked about. So just be aware of that. Just taking a quick gander before I turn things over. Edna, we actually had a slide in there with relation to CAA. Oh, that actually does quite answer your question about participation rate for CAAs, how they factor in. So for participation rate, it is a content area. So math includes both the Smarter Balanced Math Assessment as well as the CalAlp for Math. Similarly with ELA CAST and the CalAlp for Science. They're put together for a determination of participation rate. Oh, I have a few more things, sorry. So end of year submission, and then I will be turning things over to my assessment colleagues. So just a reminder, CalPADS affects a lot of different things. So the CalPADS data that goes in during the summer, during the end of year submission, it shows up on DataQuest. It's used for your LCAP metrics for state priorities. It shows up and needs to be used in your local indicators, and it shows up on the dashboard. And this year, the dashboard, which will be status only. So there is a recent change. The CalPADS submission window has been deferred. This is the third time to June 2nd now. So we'll be opening later this week. And part of the problem was that the reports that are necessary to begin the process and check your work essentially were not functional last week. So as of last Friday, there were still issues with some of the reports that the CalPADS folks need. They needed to send out to you and to other folks within your LEA to say, does this look right? Those were not functioning properly. So this delay will hopefully give them some time to fix that. And they're looking to send out a flash communication this week to provide guidance for your end of year submission about the recommended order of the 4 different submission parts, and to identify what functionality is ready and what other functionality may still need to be addressed. Yes, it's still challenging. Currently, the window for the closing of they eliminated the initial submission deadline. They've just extended it to August 26th, which was originally the amendment window. So the CDE will assess this deadline to see if they need to extend it in the coming weeks. Similarly, the 4-year cohort data. This isn't certified data. The CDE pulls the cohort data, which goes in your graduation. Right, they pull this on August 26th as well. So, but you need to know about this data because it's another important thing you need to be looking at if you're supporting your CalPADS folks. And just some of the places, so the EOY end of year 1 informs your college and career indicator. And I just want to point out this, just because college and career indicator is not on the dashboard this fall, keep in mind that this is a cohort. It's a cohort report. So those students who are 11th graders now, for example, if they completed their CT pathway this year, you want to make sure that's accurate, because next year when this comes back, you'll need to have that accurate. So this is, we're looking down the road. It's a 4-year cohort for the college and career indicator. It's not on this year's dashboard, but there's still consequences down the road. Title I is affected. This is end of year 2 is program file. So if a student is at a site that is targeted assistance school, you need to make sure you have that correct. End of year 3 captures your chronic absenteeism suspension rate. And then finally, this cohort affects your graduation rate, also affects your college and career indicator. So there's a lot going on in this end of year submissions. And I really encourage LEAs, even with the short timeline, to really support and make this a team effort now more than ever. I think it's very difficult sometimes. You can't put everything on the CalPADS coordinator. It really needs to get out to the people who are closest to the data to look at it and say, this looks right, this doesn't look right. And I think a big concern is that people are going to be leaving for summer before there's enough data to go out. So to the extent that you can, because it does affect dashboard, support your CalPADS administrators in getting this information to the right people so they can look at it. In end of year 1, there's this data collection that I think a lot of people were unaware of some of the changes, and there's a change to how it's being reported as well. But all of these work-based learning measures are now included in the end of year 1 submission. And I just think in looking at the data last fall from the prior year, There were very few internships. These are actually new. Student-led enterprises, virtual simulated work-based learning submitted. But you also have these non-registered pre-apprenticeships that were, and the pre-apprenticeships that were very seldom reported. I think we only had 2 LEAs that reported any of these, and one of them was discovered they're reporting an error. So if you've added any of these, or you have them but you weren't reporting them, be aware of that. Job Corps, WIOA, Youth Build, and the California Conservation Corps, if you're affiliated with another entity that administer these, you should know that. But also the reporting of these transition work-based experience and classroom-based work exploration. A lot of it's happening through workability, but not being reported into CalPADS, and there has to be a system in place. But you may want to explore this because eventually you want to be able to ensure you capture this. And I think most student information systems have a means of capturing now, but I think a lot of folks are unaware that they can be reporting this. Also, one note, and I'm going to talk about it more on the next slide, is the ASVAB is being collected now through a separate upload. But that is being considered as a measure for the CCI. The inside track is that it will be included. So the students who take the ASVAB, a test upon which I did horribly, by the way, I just don't have that spatial recognition thing. But that'll be part of the college and career measure. So you want to make sure if you haven't, if you have students who took it, that you get it reported. So the data collection, as noted, it's a separate reporting system. Accountability dashboard and CalPADS coordinator should have received a notification. But there's instructions on how to upload. So if you had students that took the ASVAB, definitely get it reported. It runs through June 30th because it very likely will be part of next year's college and career indicator. And you want to make sure that the students who took the ASVAB will be captured there. And then just, this is a list of reports, and not all of them are CalPADS or CalPADS reports. I've also pointed to some external places like the College Board AP Central Portal. Just look at your data. Here's what you can contrast it with to see if it looks right. So these are reports that if you are at all interested in making sure your dashboard is reflecting everything accurately, ask your CalPADS person for these reports. See if the numbers look right. That's the biggest thing. Does it make sense? Does it look like things are missing? Because a lot of times they are. And certain things like the participation in college credit courses, a lot of these things don't get reported. Little secret, you could actually, because it's a cohort, students who maybe completed college credit course in prior years, if it's not showing up in those prior years, you can still enter that. Both student information systems like ARIES, as well as the CDE has said, you could report prior years college completion just before the cohort. As long as it's in your system before the cohort graduates, it'll be counted. There's also an extract. It's currently not functional, but you should be aware of this for your District of Special Education accountability. And this has changed substantially since our last dashboard. It was only applied to assessment at that time. The academic indicator. The DSEA is now applied to all the indicators. And you want to take a look at this extract when it's working to make sure that the receiving and sending categories match up. And I have a link in here to some of the scenarios which you can run through to say, does this make sense? Because you can negotiate if this person who doesn't fit within the scenarios as being your student, you should definitely have them reporting back to the other LEA to whom they do belong for the purposes of accountability. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our assessment team. Thank you for your patience, and I'll take a look in the chat to see if there are any questions I can answer while they're going.
All right, great. Hopefully you can see the screen okay.
Stephanie, I'm seeing a blank screen. There we go.
It looks okay right now. Oh God.
Yep, it's good.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Fortunato. I'm here with Stephen Bartlett. We're going to go ahead and go over our CAASPP and ELPAC updates for you. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. We'll also go over some recent updates from the CDE coffee session, which we know was a couple of weeks ago, but there were just a couple items in there that we just wanted to reiterate for this group in case anyone wasn't able to attend. And then we'll also talk about some summer, so we want to make sure we highlight those as well. So I'll hit first and turn to Stephen, who's going to talk to you about Stephen.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm listening to a little bit of feedback. I don't see a slide that says LPAC. Stephanie, you want to forward us?
Are you able to see it or no?
Not yet.
Let me stop sharing and share again.
Sure. Oh, there we are. All right. So LPAC updates, and this has been on the mind of several LAs who have been in contact with us, and that's some of LPAC SSRs, student score reports. And we have some SSRs dated in our system all the way back to May 17th, but they were announced on 5/20 to be released on 5/23. That's this month. So they were first released. They expect them to be released in batches every Tuesday and Friday thereafter. You'll expect that K through 2, whose writing answer books that were returned earliest will be available earliest, and if they weren't returned until the very end of the summative testing window, those will be available latest. If we go to the next slide, we can see the timeline for alternate LPAC SSRs. So the expectation for alternate SSRs is out in July 2022. It has to, I believe the SB did approve alternate LPAC threshold scores, and so that is going to be out in the future. If we move on, we can see some LPAC communication timelines back in, I think, September of last year. There was a cleanup of some language that now requires notifications of parents of the availability of SSR download, availability of your downloads of student score reports. So make sure that you're communicating with parents and not just making this available on a portal. You see those dates when those released, and the full data release is expected out in July of 2022. So be sure you're getting that those communications ready and sent out now. If we go to the next slide, we can see a conflict that you're going to see as we come up upon initial LPAC testing. So everybody knows that the initial alternate LPAC is a new exam that will be for the first time used this coming year. So a lot of questions are surrounding, well, what do we do if? CD's response to a few of these questions are in the next two slides, and so I'll go over what those scenarios look like. So those numbers and the arrows that are conflicting around that calendar refer to ED code. The ED code of special ed timelines, and the ED code for creating an IEP, and the special ed and the ED code for the timeline for assessing a student within 30 calendar days of their first day of enrollment. And so a question comes up. It takes a bit of time, and the timelines for special ed IEP creation are a long process, longer than 30 days generally. What happens if we have a student who would have appropriately been tested with an initial alternate LPAC, but they don't have an IEP in place? And CD's response is the initial alternate LPAC requires an IEP, and you would administer the initial LPAC in those circumstances. So if you don't have an IEP in place in time for assessment with an initial alternate LPAC, you'd use all the universal tools and designated supports you could appropriately assign within those first 30 calendar days. Assess and don't miss that 30-day deadline for the initial LPAC. So assess with that initial LPAC. Of course, there is also stopping markers available if the students are non-responsive. So we're talking about this question that surrounds initial alternate LPAC versus the regular initial LPAC. So that means you're going to need to work with your IEP team, your special ed, your student services team to ensure that IEP process, including the alternate assessment decision confirmation worksheet, are worked through a good 90 days prior to your need to have finished the initial LPAC in order to complete that process. That doesn't mean delay enrollment. That means the alternate LPAC will not be used if you can't make the 30-day deadline for initial LPAC testing without it. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this implies that you're going to misuse the initial LPAC for students who are appropriately tested with alternate initial LPAC. So let's say we've got an enrollment of a student who is not EO or is not a American Sign Language, and you assess that student with the initial LPAC instead of the alternate LPAC because they don't have an IEP choice on that done yet. In that case, if the student is appropriately identified as an EL, you would continue to test with the summative alternate LPAC after the IEP is in place and the IEP team chooses the alternate assessment. In the case where the student was not appropriately determined to be an EL, there's correction process C. That's that old correction process we saw rolled out maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And that's a way of changing a student who was misidentified as an EL back into a non-EL prior to the assessment with a summative LPAC. So you wouldn't assess with the summative LPAC if you're going through correction process C. So that correction process would need to happen prior to summative LPAC administration. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so along with this, the standard setting indicated that there are 3 levels for the alternate LPAC, the summative alternate LPAC, which means that there'll be alternate LPAC-based reclassification guidance to update. Criterion 1 has a 4-level threshold, and students who achieve Criterion 1 for reclassification would have been a level 4. This is most appropriately addressed by the MOS unit, and I'll leave all the other details of that to them. Just know that reclassification guidance is being developed with the Special Ed and Multilingual Support Division, and information on that will be provided in early 22-23. Late July, early August. We're moving on into CAASPP. I believe I'm going to do the first 3 slides in CAASPP and then hand it over to Stephanie. And those first 3 slides are about the shortened blueprint. Okay, so looking forward to next year's CAASPP, we use the shortened blueprint this year. We used the shortened blueprint last year. Are we going to use the shortened blueprint next year? And the answer is, we believe so. CDE hasn't requested approval. They're asking for approval in the September board meeting for that use of the shortened blueprint going forward. There are, according to the September 21st, 2021 SBA update on assessment program activities, there was some multi-year plans for use of the adjusted blueprint. Those plans included use of the adjusted blueprint going forward. So your question might be, well, does that mean we're going to go forward without any any composite claim reporting, or excuse me, or without any claim reporting. And the answer in that update from a year ago is there's going to be a composite claim reporting of reading and listening, writing and research for math, composite claim reporting for concepts and procedures, mathematical practices. Also work, later work, working on student level assessment target reporting as a high priority for future use of this adjusted blueprint. As you may recall, the shortened adjusted blueprint resulted in a loss of that reporting for our student level data. If we can move on to the next slide. So does a shortened blueprint have implications for achievement comparability? So overall scale scores and achievement levels are comparable to those of prior years. That's also based on their 2021 update on program activities. So that doesn't necessarily mean that last year's 2020, 2021 is comparable. But that does suggest that they believe that the 18-19 would be comparable to last year, 2021-22, and excuse me, to this year, 2021-22. If we go to the next slide, there is a buyer beware on last year's results. Even though we had results for districts that administered the CAASPP last year, the suggestion guidance for interpretation of the 2020-21 aggregated results, that document that released that suggested guidance for interpretation suggested that participation issues make those particular results not as comparable, at least at the state level. And if you look at your local results, you may be able to interpret those local results, but at the state county level, the participation was not sufficient to make any comparisons between a shortened blueprint from last year, shortened blueprint from this year, or the results from last year and the results from this year. So you're going to have this year's results, 21-22. Those will be comparable to next year's results. And presumably, even though there's a difference between shortened blueprint and full blueprint, comparable back to 18-19. Okay, those are those shortened blueprint pieces. I believe this is Stephanie. Is this you, Stephanie, or am I doing this one too?
No, I'll go ahead.
All right.
All right. So we know that LPAC window is coming to a close today. Your CAASPP is going to be coming to a close very soon, if it hasn't already, in the next few weeks. Do pay close attention to the different types of checklists that they have available. Both LPAC and CAASPP do a really nice job based on your user role of, breaking down, some to-dos for you for the month of May, some to-dos as you get into June, some next steps for you. So these are live links that will take you to each of the different checklists. Certainly feel free to share those with the appropriate user roles, just to make sure that the follow-up is accurate as that window is coming to an end. And Evan had shared this information earlier. We really just had this slide in here again, just to kind of reiterate. We know that your windows are coming to a close. Keep in mind, there is no extension of the windows. But if for example, your school year is going to, let's say, June 15th, and you potentially had June 5th as your original ending date, you do have the option to be able to extend your window just to the last day of your school year. So you can't go past that, even though it does say here, or July 15th, it does have the caveat there that, or your last day of instruction. So if you haven't had a chance to extend it, or if it is something that you need to do, it's only to your last day of instruction. So just wanted to reiterate that again. There were some emails that went out about some post-CAASPP communication for both May and June. Again, taking a close look at, there's the opportunity to be able to provide some feedback about the CAASPP assessment. You'll find that link on the CAASPP website. So please do check that out. They do want your feedback as to how the administration went for your LEA this year. Also make sure that you have a plan in place for how you're going to notify your site coordinators about what your local results look like. I know some of the questions already was, is anybody able to see your results and SIRS for CAASPP already? And those are not out there just yet. They're going to be coming soon. You should start to see some of that. Should be expected come June, later in June. So keep an eye out for that. But also, what is your plan for accessing and downloading what the preliminary results look like? How will you get that information out to all your stakeholders? What is your plan to share your results? So just some next steps in thinking. There is also on June 9th, we've mentioned this before, but just to make sure that everyone's aware, there is a post-test webinar. So if you haven't had a chance to register for that, please make sure you do. And then also to start thinking about, how are you going to prepare and collaborate with, what your communication is going to look like that's going to be coming. We know that you're going to have those access to the electronic SSRs. How is that information going to be disseminated? What does your plan look like for your district? So just some kind of heads up as to next steps to start your thinking on what that's going to look like for your LEA. There was also an assessment spotlight. I pulled this information out because I just wanted to highlight for you. It was just a couple weeks ago, but they've done a really nice job of sort of consolidating the quick reference guides that are on the site. There used to be about 68 of these quick reference guides. They've now limited it to about 28. So these links here will actually take you to those quick reference guides. And those might be, pieces of information also that you're going to be sharing out with your staff in your district, how to access those results. That's usually the next question that undoubtedly comes is, where can we find the results? How do we start to take a look at them? And so there are some reports in there, some quick reference guides that are specific to SIRS and looking at the different types of reports that are available. And also, so I'll go ahead and turn this back over to you, Stephen. There were some updates from the coffee session, again, which was just a few weeks ago, but we wanted to just reiterate some of the information in there just to make sure we're getting that messaging out to everyone.
Okay. Before we go into this slide, let me look at one of the chat questions was, our LPAC SSRs are in the SIS. The dashboard shows us at 96% released. However, when I run the student data file, it only has 42 students, the file I need for third-party systems. Does anyone else notice the same discrepancy? I do recall a similar phenomenon being described at the Wednesdays at 1 CAASPP and LPAC meetings last week. Was it last week that we last held that? There was several LEAs that were having a similar circumstance. Marcus or Bob indicated one of the ETS staff members may be here, and we can run
Yes,
that.
I am present. Hello, everybody. Good morning.
Hi, Marcus. How are you?
Doing
So
great. Sorry, I've been listening in the background, so go for it.
you're showing up as Wendy Missick. On
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my direct manager. Sorry about that.
Great. So what we'll do, why don't we run that by you as the first question in about 6 slides, something like that. Okay.
Yeah,
So
sure.
all right. Well, so we'll run those. Great to know that Marcus is here, and we'll run those questions by Marcus in just a sec. So here we are at a few of the coffee sessions. This comes from ETS, from Marcus's group, but a few of these slides we're gonna drop in on you just to make sure you're aware. Initial LPAC administration scoring training, that opens tomorrow, the LPAC AST. The training's required for LEA LPAC coordinators who have eligible students. So that means the alternate LPAC, if you have students who are going to take the alternate LPAC, then you'd be required to take it as an LEA coordinator. This can be a little bit confusing, so I gave us another slide right after this indicating that you want to make sure that you're looking at the various roles, and training requirements are variant by role and prior training. So if you are an LEA LPAC coordinator at a site that has students who test with the alternate and are also ELs, you need to do the LEA certification course. If you're a new LEA coordinator, you would need to do a different subset. There's a great explanation of that on the elpac.org website. Also on this slide, dropped in from there. So if you're a test examiner, if you have test examiners, they would have different requirements based on whether they were new to the role or they had already completed the certification course. Be sure that you look through those requirements for each of those different roles. Going down to the next slide. There is a supplemental ordering available now. I believe, are past the initial LPAC ordering window for the K2 answer booklets. So we're in a supplemental ordering window. And that is from May 9th to June 9th. So if you didn't order during the original ordering window, make sure you get those K2 booklets requested. CAS coordinator designation, July 1st, that is a month away, is the deadline for designated CAS coordinators for a 22-23 administration. Be sure that you or somebody is assigned by your superintendent.
All right, great. So we'll go ahead and finish off by talking about some professional learning opportunities that are coming up. First, if you haven't had a chance to register, this is for the LPAC new coordinator, or if you have a CASP new coordinator, please do make sure these are going to be hosted here by LACOE. The links are live here for you to be able to register. So if you know of someone that is going to be new to that role this next year, please do share this information with them. We'd love to be able to have you there. So Monday, June 13th is the first one here for LPAC, and we'll have an optional follow-up one on Tuesday for a couple of hours. We'll be doing some Q&As and some live demos during that one. And for CASP, you'll see that will be on September 8th. The new coordinator training, again, with a follow-up on that Friday with 2-hour Q&A and also some live demos. Also, Steve and I are going to be hosting a data institute for administrators. We'll be talking about how you can really leverage your data to improve instruction. That'll be on July 26th. And that'll really especially be key. We know that, your data is going to be coming out very soon in the next month or so. So we want to be able to carve out that time to specifically talk about, what type of data is available, what does it look like, individual results, group results, and how you can really use that to strengthen, your use of the data throughout this next coming school year. So we have that link here for you to be able to register. Also, some additional workshops coming up this year. We'll be looking at how to administer IABs as a formative assessment tool. That'll be in August, also just for administrators. And then we have some other ones that'll be remaining throughout the year that we'll be looking at. And these ones are for teachers, for TOSAs, for instructional coaches, also for administrators as well. But looking at how to administer IABs, we'll take a look at hand scoring IABs. We'll be providing a CAST overview. So that'll be a 3-part series. Tools for teachers, connections playlist, taking a deeper look at performance tasks. So keep an eye out. We'll be sharing these flyers with you as they become available so that you can go ahead and share them out with your staff as well. Also, if you haven't already, the California Assessment Conference is coming up. Please do register if you are able or interested in attending. It's October 18th through the 20th. It'll be in Riverside, so not too far, hopefully, for some of us. But also there is a call for presenters. So the CDE is really looking for any educators who are interested in submitting a proposal. Perhaps your LEA would like to be able to, highlight an assessment tool or a practice. Maybe you'd like to submit a proposal as a team. Something that's really geared towards the target audience of, classroom educators or site administrators. So if you are interested, the link here for you to be able to submit your proposal no later than June 15th is available for you as well. Also, please do continue to check out the CAASPP and LPAC websites. They have all kinds of training opportunities for you here that you can access. This is just kind of a preview for you. There will be one for SIRS for administrators and one for teachers. So that one's coming up. This is coming up real soon too here. So a nice opportunity to be able to learn about SIRS, but geared from a different angle. So we know that SIRS for administrators and SIRS for teachers is going to have a slightly different conversation. So there's opportunities for both. Both of the registration links for those are here as well. I think we mentioned earlier the interim informative assessment training series. There are these different modules coming up. These are 3-hour online training sessions for teachers or other LEA staff. They'll be administered throughout the summer and also into the fall. So take a look for these different opportunities. Module 1, looking at the formative assessment process and tools for teachers. Module 2, taking a closer look at gauging student progress and also taking a look at those online systems. And then module 3, taking a deeper look at hand scoring to analyze different written responses and understanding the different expectations for instruction for next steps. And then Evan mentioned this one here earlier, the assessment and accountability information meeting and what those 3 different sessions will include. And then we just want to say thank you. We know that your testing season is now very soon coming to an end. And so please know that we are still here for you throughout the summer. We know that before you know it, that LPAC starts back up again. So our contact information is here and feel free to reach out to us as needed. And then we'll go ahead and turn it back over.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
Stephanie, before we get into the ETS Q&A, Evan would like to drop an end of your survey into the chat. And so take a beat before diving in with Marcus. But thank you, Marcus, for being here. And thank you on behalf of everybody.
Yeah, just to get a little context, we do want to make sure that we have your feedback. It's been an interesting year. And of course, we're transitioning. We don't know quite where we stand in terms of having in-person meetings, if we can have in-person meetings. But please take a minute to fill out this survey. You can, if you want, submit it anonymously as well. But we want to know what's working for you, what's most important to you. We want to get to know our audience a little bit better and what might work for you moving forward. And there's some open-ended questions for you to provide your notes. We certainly appreciate you. We just want to make these meetings as meaningful as possible to you. And we'd really like to see you in person. I think that goes without question, but we also recognize we're a huge county and it really doesn't make sense if we're only sharing information to bring you to Downey. But if we're doing more than that, or if you want to get together and get to know your colleagues in person, maybe we can find some opportunities to do that next year. So take an opportunity to fill out the survey and that'll help us plan for next year. Thanks.
As you're taking a moment to work through that survey, as we invite Marcus to come on and share a screen, I also invite you to unmute yourself and ask questions or raise your hand and ask questions of Marcus directly. Marcus, do you have anything to present?
First of all, I just want to say it's as the LPAC window closes, it's been nice being able to assist you guys across the LEAs and at the County Office of Education. It's been very insightful to get your feedback as well, and a lot of great questions you've probably seen over email, and some of you who have communicated with me. I do apologize that I wasn't able to get to the phone line a little bit better. A lot of the LEAs have been tying me down via chats and the emails, so but I do usually follow up via the voicemails. But you guys are super lucky that you have Evan, Steven, and Stephanie there on your team. You guys are some of the it's the highest caliber of an LEA and a group I've seen in a long time. So you guys have a lot of great resources in those 3 leaders for your region, definitely. So I just wanted to say that because the information you guys have is just, wow, just spot on and just is great. So I just want to say that first. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah, no, you guys have been great to work with. So it's been a breeze. So thank you so much for making it enjoyable and yeah, just very easy for me. So thank you. So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to read off that first question if you'd like to If you want to scroll up in the chat, it's our LPAC SSRs are in our SIS, showing 96% released. However, running
Oh
the
yes, I did see
data
that
file,
earlier.
maybe a lower number. Have you heard of things similar to that at the ETS side?
Yes. So what's happening a lot is as the summative window's closing, and then also a lot of those CAASPP windows are closing. What I've noticed just across the administration for both testing programs is that as far as the dashboard for TOMS, there has been some delays because there's a lot of again those windows that are closing up at this time, and a lot of LEAs are actually going onto the system to view those gauge bars as well. There's actually a small presentation I have that will give you access to a resource if you're not already familiar with it. That's going to show some more real time and a little bit more updated information as the dash instead of the TOMS dashboard. I understand that a lot of you use the TOMS dashboard to view your completion rates, to see students who have completed or have not started, but just what I've noticed across the administration again is the TOMS dashboard is somewhat very slow in updating. So I personally don't use or go by the TOMS dashboard a lot of the time. I use the completion reports under the links button in TOMS, which I'll be showing to you all in the presentation I have as well. So that's the reason why your SIS might be importing those scores electronically, but then you're only seeing a 96% rate on your TOMS dashboard, just because a lot of the time the information that's updating from the test delivery system to the Cambium completion reporting system and then to TOMS. So it's going through a couple different passes, and that's why a lot of the time it's very delayed. So we do apologize for that.
Do you need to share screen, Marcus?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that right now. Yeah. Just open it up here. There we go. Okay, there we go. Should be sharing now. So you're probably familiar with this, as I have used this format a couple times for the past DAAN issues, but I've updated it with a lot of information regarding those completion reports. So just a couple of quick reminders. So a lot of things I've been getting from the field as of lately has been the completion of the security forms. Sorry, hold on. There we go. So what's happening is a lot of these users that are receiving the emails and also the roles that they've been updated with as well, a lot of them are waiting until, sorry about that, a lot of them are waiting until the actual date of administration, and then I start getting a flood of emails and calls and chats about, hey, our users aren't able to access it, or they're only seeing the interim assessments. So again, you just want to make sure that they're completing those security forms at least 30 to 60 minutes prior to actually launching a session, or else when they log into the TA interface, what's going to happen is they're going to see only the interim assessments. Now, one thing you can always check as a site coordinator or an LEA coordinator, it's actually in TOMS. It should be the security forms and remote administration report. You can pull that up at any point. It's updated very frequently as far as who has completed and signed and submitted those forms. It's actually going to show you the date and the timestamp in which that form was completed. Let's say you have an administrator that has a 10 o'clock session that they need to administer for, yet they only signed the form, let's say at 9:45. What's going to happen is the report's going to reflect 9:45 as the timestamp, and then when they try to log in at, let's say 9:50, only 5 minutes has passed. So what's happening is, sorry about that. What's happening is if they just submitted that, it's going to take about 30 to 60 minutes after the users sign those security affidavits and or forms, depending on the role they've been given, in order for the test selection or the appropriate test selection to appear. So just make sure that they're doing that as well. On the CAASPP side of things, since the LPAC window is closing, if you're going to keep on giving remote testing or remote administration, just make sure that those permissions are set to Y. At least least about 24 hours before the student's test. It should be a little bit quicker than that, but I like to give that amount of time so that we can fully integrate to the test delivery system. Now, with the remote administration, please note that even though the student is set to the remote administration for yes, that doesn't negate the fact that they can actually still test in person. The remote administration indicated as Y for yes, that just allows them to be administered remotely. It doesn't prohibit them from going back and forth between, even if they start a test remotely, can they complete that in person? Yes, they can still complete that in person. Setting that to Y doesn't prohibit them from testing in person. It just allows them the capability to administer remotely. So, and then this last one here actually comes into play with a lot of the stairs cases I've seen as well. Before the student is approved for the test, just make sure that the TA or the TE, whatever test it is checking that eyeball icon in the TA interface to ensure that the correct test settings are reflecting for the student. Many a time is what happens is the student will be approved. The TA opens that, the TA starts the session, the TA approves the student, and when the student gets like to the first or second question, they're noticing, hey, why is this test in Spanish? Or I don't see this test setting appearing for me. And at that point, it's not that it's too late, it's that a stairs report has to go forward, because when a student opens any subject, this goes for LPAC or for CAASPP, they open a subject or a domain, it locks all those test settings that is applicable to that subject or domain. It locks it into place. So the only way to have that reset is, again, a stairs case needs to be filed, the test will be reset, and then making sure that the test settings in that eyeball icon again are reflecting if they're changed in the student profile or uploaded as well. So please check on that. It'll help you in the long run as avoiding a stairs case later on. Just making sure that they're checking the eyeball icon in that TA interface. So I want to go over a little bit of some of the common issues that I've received so far in the last couple weeks that still are occurring to a lot of the LEAs when administering. So the no test available at this time. I'm going to make sure that the student is assigned to the appropriate test by verifying that test assignment within TOMS. If it was assigned less than 24 hours ago, please allow the test delivery system to update that assignment. So a lot of the time when that no tests are available at this time appears, because either a test assignment was uploaded, or also as well, I should include, a lot of the time what I'm coming across is that test is already completed. So I'll check the completion reports. If an LEA provides me an SSID number, I'll look in the completion reports, which we'll get to here momentarily, and it'll show as being completed weeks ago. So a lot of the times they just need just a gentle reminder saying, hey, just checked on this for you. This student has actually already completed. So that occurs a lot of the time as well. And then the inactive summative LPAC or CAASPP as well. So this again falls under the student already completing those eligible opportunities as well. And then again, checking the completion status reports, which it's going to be next, is going to allow you to see what the status of that student's testing, and it should show either completed or reported. That message is directly indicative of the student already completing that test. And here's the last one with those still common issues that I've come across. So this one I've come across not just with the CAASPP, but all the assessments, the requiring remote proctor.
Marcus,
Again, a lot of the time, yeah.
I think what you're saying implies that you're changing slides, but we don't see a slide change. But if that's not the case,
Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So this last one was something I came across last week a lot of. They have not selected the Y for the students. So the yes for remote proctor. So they're trying to test the student remotely, and this message is the most commonly associated one that appears. So you have to grant that student the yes, of course, for the remote proctor, and just allow for that to update as well. Any questions so far on anything? I'm trying to look through the chat as well. Nothing that I see here. So good question, Angie. As far as the dashboard, is this the Tom's dashboard you're referring to as well?
I think I,
Yes. So mhm.
oh no, I was gonna say, I think I put some information in the chat too about that CASP stairs and appeals report.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
just
thank you
wondering
so
if
much.
it could be in the, where the completion reports are, if there could be something there with the stairs. Because I know you get it in Tom's, right?
The completion report, can you clarify that?
You know where you get the completion or testing and management? I just didn't know if there was something in there that we could see all the stairs instead of running a report in Tom's. I don't know, I just thought.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely understand. So where you're looking in those, if you're seeing, if the student had a stairs or anything like that, the only thing that would indicate, it's not going to show the exact stairs that was put forward with that, but it will say, like, say, for example, if you had a restart or a reset, it's actually going to show it in the completion reports, not in Tom's, but under the links section in Tom's. If you're in the plan and manage testing or even search by
Right.
SSID feature, which we're going to go over, you'll actually see, the student will have a reset and it'll say 1, and that would indicate that at some point that student's test was reset, and that would most likely be a result of a stairs case.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Marcus, I have a quick question regarding stairs. And by the way, thank you for putting up with me through the testing and all the help that you gave.
No problem at all, Diana.
Is there any way, or is it just a system set up that, especially, this year was a little bit different, but with expired tests, where if, say, you had a list of 25 students that have expired tests, but they're at different sites, different grade levels, maybe even different tests, but that it's all because of the same reason, expired test. Is there any process that they're thinking of to make that available to us, to be able to just do it all in one time rather than having to go to each, for each school?
Each site. That's a great question. I can definitely notate that for you. At this time, as far as I know, the closest thing we have to that is usually on the CAASPP side. I know that if there's any stairs that are submitted on the LPAC side of things, it usually requires an individual one for each domain. I know if it's a particular assessment, I understand what you're saying. I know if it's a particular assessment, it should allow you to put in multiple SSIDs. But as far as if there's going to be a file that will allow you to just gather all the information for a particular incident, that's not something we have available at this time, but I can definitely make a note of that to you and actually pass it along to our stairs team as well.
Yeah, because I could sneak in, like if it had a language arts performance task and I had a 6th grader and a 7th grader, even though it only allows you to choose the 6th grade, I was able to put the 6th and 7th grade because they're both from the same school. But it'd be nice if we could actually do multiple schools and multiple grade levels.
I believe there.
Sure, yeah.
I thought, Marcus, that there is, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are running a plan and manage testing, if you're running a report and you select that you want to see, like, as long as you select all of the schools, right? So Diana, assuming that.
Yeah, I'm just talking about stairs though, actually.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
how to get the completion, but actually putting in the stairs, I spent so much time putting in.
Got
for
it.
different.
Yeah, I can definitely pass that along.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely pass that along to our stairs team to see if there's anything like that in the future. I'm not sure if there would be, but that's actually a pretty good idea to streamline that. I definitely understand.
You can send me a check when it's
Also, Marcus, is there a way, we had a couple of newcomer students that were not supposed to take the ELA portion, but they did. And so I was having trouble finding where in stairs to submit that. So it seemed like the criteria didn't fit that particular situation. So just wanted to give feedback on that.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually a great question. So I know a lot of you have gone through the stairs process, and when sometimes some of you working with myself as well, a lot of the time is stairs has pre-selected testing incidents or testing type appeals that are listed, and sometimes that might not be the exact thing that had occurred, but usually what I do is to direct them to choose the closest incident that had occurred, because we also have an incident box and a further details box that you can provide the exact incident that had occurred. And then when we actually reviews those stairs cases, we'll be able to see that as well, and then give the appropriate appeal type as well.
I thought I remembered that that's not an appealable incident.
And yes, that's correct. So that particular incident, sorry, I forgot to circle back to that. Yeah, that particular incident isn't an appealable, it doesn't require a stairs case, even if they are exempt for that LEA, even if they start the test and you realize, oh no, the student is eligible for the one-time exemption, you should be able to have them stop testing, and then based on that date that they have in their CALPADS, they're basically going to be eligible for that one-time exemption. But you're correct, there's not a stairs case specifically for that.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So going back here, hopefully you can see the slides again. So this next portion of it gets into what I was explaining before about the completion reports. So this is very helpful that I found as far as for the site coordinators and the LEA coordinators. So I understand a lot of you use the TOMS dashboard. However, a lot of the information you're seeing on the TOMS dashboard is quite delayed. So in order to get a more real-time and updated completion report, you definitely want to use that links button. I'm not sure if you see it on your screen there, but I took a screenshot and a couple screenshots of where to follow this and actually where to, if you're not familiar with this particular tool. So it's going to be under the links button in TOMS. And if you click on where it says completion status, should be the third link down under test administration. It's going to bring you to this screen that some of you might be familiar with. So the plan and manage testing system and the search by SSID. So these are two that I use really often that really help kind of narrow down, you know, this student, a lot of the time is, oh, we keep getting a report saying the student hasn't tested. Why do we keep getting that report when we know we've tested them? By using these two searches, you're going to be able to determine a little bit better on, you know, if the student actually completed or not there. So the first one is the plan and manage testing. So if you click on that, where it shows the screenshot there, that's the Tide and Cambium completion system. So if you click on that, what's going to happen is you're going to be brought to this page here, and you're probably thinking, oh man, look at all these search filters. So using these search filters, you can actually filter out the exact test and the test name, the district and the school site that you're looking for. It even gives you the option for the student's first name and their SSID if you're trying to get very specific with the information. The last part where it says get specific, that's you're going to be able to use to a couple different things. Students who have or have not from that drop-down selection, or completed or started. Now I know it says any. The reason it says any and it has actually those drop-downs from that selection is because this can be used for interim assessments as well. So you can actually see also interim assessments to see what students have or have not completed or started any of those opportunities. And then as you see, there's a couple different selections for those get specific. So you can actually look for students who on the, you know, and again, for summative, it's only going to be one opportunity, but for depending on the test type that you select, it's going to give you multiple opportunities. And then search students by their SSID. You should be able to enter 20 SSIDs as long as they're separated by the commas. You can look for students whose current opportunity is set to expire, and you know, say they open the performance task and they're on day 3. You'll be able to see, you know, who their current opportunity will expire in this amount of days. And then the last one is students. You can use the session ID, and I believe that there's a drop-down selection for the SSID as well. You can look between a certain set of dates. If a student started on that particular date and it's today's date, you can use those calendar icons to toggle that as well. I'm just going to see if there's any questions here. Any questions from anybody so far? It's just going to be one or two more slides, and then I'll be done.
I saw that when you did the drop down, it said state dashboard. Is that something we all have access to, or just you?
I believe it's just the LEA coordinators who have that access to the state dashboard. I know it's a link that goes directly to that state dashboard. But unfortunately, that's not something we oversee directly.
Because I don't have that. I'm wondering how that's determined.
That's a good question. I can definitely check it in for you
Okay.
on that, why it's not appearing for yourself, because usually
Yeah, because
state
I'm the
dashboard,
testing coordinator.
it might
for
just
this
appear for
district.
myself as well.
Okay.
So we have access to that as well, but I can definitely check on that for you. So the last couple slides here is just going to be going over the search by SSID feature, which I use quite frequently. So when you go under search by SSID under that completion status report section, you're going to see this pop up for you. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like when you actually search for that. You'll see a box listed there. You should be able to put in, again, up to 20 SSIDs that are separated by commas. When you actually use this box filter and click on generate report on that side, you'll see everything appear in these tables here. So you'll see the name of the student, which of course I've redacted because it's PII, the SSID, the subject, the school name that they're at, the actual test. I use just the initial LPAC for demonstration purposes. And the most important thing is the date started, date completed, and last activity. So a lot of the times LEAs will come to me and say, hey, we already tested this student, or why is this student still appearing as needing to be tested? And if you look at the date started, last activity, or date completed, it's going to give you indication of that. It'll show as blank and the date completed if they haven't actually completed that assessment. It'll just show the last activity. And for example, this student started the test that date, their last activity was that date, and they completed it all within the same date as well. Now, one thing I do want to draw to your attention is another question I've gotten a lot of is if you look under the status section, let's see if I can magnify this. If you look under here where it says status, you'll see where it says reported 6 of 9. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, why does it show reported 6 of 9? Wouldn't it show pause 6 of 9? This again goes back to the delays that are happening between when the student actually completes the test and then when it's actually showing as reported in this completion report. Typically, it'll go from started to paused if they've stopped at any point, expired if, for example, if they've passed the calendar dates there or the window has closed, and completed and reported. So completed will usually show here as well in this status section if the student has just recently completed within the past half hour. That's what I've seen so far. And then eventually it'll change to reported. Now going back to where it says 6 out of 9, again, we've noticed that there's been some delays as far as when a student actually completes that report, and then the number of questions should actually update to the 9 out of 9 or the 14 out of 14, as opposed to showing 6 out of 9 or 11 out of 14. That's something that has occurred as well. Don't worry, Janice, I'll go ahead and send those slides to Evan directly, and then he'll be able to share that with everybody as well. Sure. And then the last thing here is just a couple of resources you can use. So since the LPAC window is pretty much closed today, well, the hours remaining at least, I went ahead and included just the CAASPP Online Test Administration Manual, and then also the Summative Online Post-Test Guide. This should be applicable for both LPAC and for CAASPP. So those links will be available to you as well. And then our number here directly as well. If any of you have questions, it's best, emails get answered very frequently. I'm usually always checking my inbox, and I'm on chat as well. Again, I do apologize if I'm not able to get to your call directly, as I'm most likely assisting another LEA at that time, but you will be hearing back from me. So please feel free to leave a voicemail. And if you have any SSIDs as well, feel free to leave those in either the chats or the chats, emails, or calls as well. SSIDs help me greatly in determining, why a student's not able to log in or what's their completion status or so forth. So SSIDs are very, very helpful.
Thanks, Marcus.
Yeah, does anybody have any closing questions or anything of that nature I can help with?
just have a quick question about tracking summative LPAC writing booklets. I have proof of delivery of one of them, and yet it was delivered, just a few weeks ago. How can we track that it's actually been received? Because I know I had one get lost last year.
That's a good question. Actually, it's funny that came up today with some of our team members as well. Let me go ahead. I will write that down for you. I'm not sure if we have a direct indication of, we can provide tracking numbers, and we can get those tracking numbers directly from the tracking folks here. But as far as, let me just see if there's any update on that.
Well, I have the tracking number and I know the date that it was delivered.
Okay.
It's just and I have another one that's allegedly was submitted by another school, and I have some antsy parents and teachers. So just curious on how we can see when those results might be processed.
Oh, okay, understood. So you're looking more of like in what process they are of scoring, correct?
Correct.
Okay. As far as I know, we don't have any process in place for that, but I can definitely write that down for you as well and check in with my team for you. Sure.
Awesome. Like something along the lines of, instead of paused, received, or something along those lines.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely, I can jot that down for you. No problem.
I did have a question for the LPAC for the one-on-one testing.
Sure.
Sure. Is it required that the examiner use the secure browser for the one-on-one testing?
Is this for an alternate LPAC or the regular?
The regular LPAC.
Yeah, so depending on what the grade level is, they're gonna actually need the secure browser. So I believe it's kindergarten through second grade. They can access everything still online through the online testing platform. But if it's grades 3 through 12, they would need that secure browser. And if they don't use a secure browser, I also believe that when they log in, they're actually going to receive a message saying that this browser cannot be used as well.
Okay, so it won't allow them to do it.
Correct. It's going to give them that error message because they would require the secure browser for a secure testing environment.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, with no other questions coming in, we'd like to thank you, Marcus, and we'd like to thank everyone who's participating. Just a reminder, we will upload this video, we'll edit the recording and send out a link just as soon as we can. We also will take questions and summarize responses to send out in a follow-up question and answer by next Tuesday and next Monday. I think we try to shoot for. I know time is of the essence, so we'll get this information out as soon as we possibly can. Thank you for joining us, and Marcus will share his slides with me. We'll get those uploaded to Canvas, and those will be included. We really appreciate you taking your time to be with us, and everyone, good luck getting to the end of the year. We'll see you soon.